did just come back from an Elbows Up conference. Do you want to just give me a quick recap of what you learned at the conference? Anything that was like a big takeaway from it?
Well, I mean, my job was to sort of create the historical context and scale and conditionality, and talk about the history of what was successful and what's been successful. And still successful in the world. If you look at the World Economics Forum, which countries do the best? It's these Nordic countries, which both a care economy and a more equity, but also rapid economic growth along green lines. And so there were some amazing people there talking about things like what would happen with a green economy. There was a union guy who talked about a just economy, a just transition. And so he would talk to his workers, for example, about the fact that if the tar sands are not the answer to a green economy, and there's an alternative, the number of jobs you would get doing a green economy are much greater than you're going to get in the tar sands. Mm-hmm. And then there were people who talked about some indigenous influences around the country on a green economy and how remarkable those projects were going on. And then we had some people doing a care economy, how much the federal government over time has actually cut public funding to health, education, and welfare.
You are a professor in the Economics and Society stream here.
Right.
Why is economics and society important to you, and how does your research reflect that?
Well, I mean, the mainstream of the profession thinks about methodological individualism. So it begins with micro foundations, and it grows from micro foundations. Our position is people make choices, but not under the conditions of their own making. So our preoccupation is the conditions under which it make, and those conditions are often the most powerful force in capitalist society is the business class, the capitalist class. And our position is that it shouldn't be their position that dictates and determines what kind of policy should follow. And so economy and society is about that kind of power, and the argument that both the economics that flows out of it and who wins Nobel Prizes, who gets funded, all these things are in many cases reflected in the interests of the business class. Our position is that should not be our priority. Our priority, their rate of profit, is not our interest. As long as they have control over the economy, everyone has to be concerned about it, and governments then sort of react to their needs. And so I ask my students in class, can you think of any institutions in Canada or the United or in Manitoba where we don't rely on the private sector? Manitoba Hydro, universities, the health sector. We think more and more of that should be the way in which the economy works.
I myself am an undergrad student. Everybody else in this room as well is an undergrad student.
Right.
What advice would you give to an undergraduate student, maybe not specifically in economics, but just an undergraduate student that you wish you knew when you were doing your undergrad?
Okay, it's necessary for you to learn the techniques, mm-hmm. But the math is a tool. Econometrics is a tool. And the biggest advice I could give you is actually understanding the theory, the history behind the economic decisions that are being made. And so without that, you're essentially someone with a set of tools without any actually theory or ideas about what's going on. And so while the tools become more and more important in the profession, and of course it becomes a requirement to do it, what becomes less important is actually understanding the world. And they've done surveys of graduate students in top places. And what choice would you prefer, understanding the history and the material or getting the tools? And they said the tools, because that's what I get ahead with. So my answer would be read, think critically about the subject matter, and then apply the tools. Not make the tools the first and foremost decision. What makes you decide on what to do and with economics.
Awesome. Professor Chernomas, thank you so much.